All right, Alexander, we have to discuss Hunter Biden and the laptop from hell. That is what it is branded as now, the laptop from hell. So, Matt Gaetz, congressman from Florida, actually entered the contents of the laptop into congressional records. Very bold, very smart move. So now I guess when people are going to reference the contents of that laptop, there's no way anybody can say, any big tech organization can say this is fake news or this is false information or this is not verified. Everything now is going to be public record. We already have the contents, but now it's going to be congressional public record. Very good move from Matt Gaetz there. But we have CNN. We had the New York Times a week ago. We have CNN. We have the Washington Post, and we have other Democrat friendly, deep state friendly, deep state influenced, I would say, and I'm being very kind in my words, organizations, media organizations, now going after Hunter and Joe over this laptop. What is going on here?
Well, can I, first of all, before we discuss that, just make one important point, which is that, of course, Joe Biden must have known that the laptop was his son from the moment it appeared, from the moment it surfaced. He can't have been unaware of this. I mean, it is inconceivable. And he must have known that the contents of that laptop were true. So he went through the last weeks of the election pretending otherwise, or at least not pretending otherwise exactly, but letting this idea that it was all Russian disinformation spread and take hold. Now, I would have thought that was a serious issue, and I think it is an extremely serious issue because, of course, it does beg questions about the way in which he won the election. And I would not at all be surprised if this thing escalates further, which, to be straightforward about it, I think it will. I wouldn't be at all surprised if that is starting to be brought up in ever more difficult political circumstances. And if we have a Republican majority in the House of Representatives, which is now, I think everybody accepts come November, that's a certainty. And if we have a further swing to the Republicans in the Senate, which I think everybody accepts now is also all but a certainty, then at that point, that fact that Joe Biden wasn't forthcoming about the truth about the laptop could become important if the Republicans do decide to press forward with impeachment proceedings, as some people think they may. I want to make that point in advance. But the interesting thing is, all of these comments now are coming from Democrat, deep state aligned media, from the New York Times initially, now from CNN, which is as deep state as it gets. I mean, it's almost the publicity arm, to say it frankly, of the US intelligence community, from the Washington Post, about which you could say exactly the same thing. They're all coming out, they're talking about what is in this laptop. Now, I personally think that if the American people had known about this laptop and it had been clearly explained to them what had happened, I don't think Biden could have won that election. I think that if the full details of what goes out into this laptop are brought before the American people, which they are now being, I don't see how President Biden can remain in office. That's my own feeling, because some of the contents of that laptop are, I mean, appalling. And, appalling isn't even a strong enough word. Even if the president himself were not directly involved, his son clearly is, in very, very, very dark ways, and I've been choosing my words carefully. But all the indications are that the president himself is involved at all kinds of tangential levels. So, given that this is so, why is this all being brought up now? Now, we've had two theories. There's a theory that you and Robert Barnes have, which is that the deep state is bringing all this out because they are wanting to put pressure on Joe Biden because the economic situation is turning incredibly difficult. We're seeing lots of economic problems in the US, and they want to keep him firm on the Ukraine issue. And I think that's possible. I'm starting increasingly to edge towards the view that this is intended to pave the way for leveraging Joe out. That's my own personal view. I mean, it seems to me that this is becoming very difficult to explain in any other terms. So I'm going to make a guess. We're going to, at some point, going to see charges brought. I don't see how we can avoid seeing charges brought. So we're going to see charges brought. We're going to see all kinds of revelations about the financial dealings, especially in China. I mean, that's much bigger than Ukraine is, but, you know, in all sorts of places. And I think at some point, you're going to see, some point in the summer, the people from the Congress coming to the president, explaining to the president, Mr. President, your position is now impossible. It's never happened before like this in the United States, but we've never been in a situation like this in the United States. For the good of the party, for the good of the country, you must now leave, because if you don't, come November, the Republicans will bring impeachment proceedings, and at that point we can't support you.
Yeah, I agree. Hunter Biden is under investigation. We have to remind everybody, I have to remind myself, we also have the Durham investigation, which is running parallel. But I mean, you know,
in which it must always be remembered that Biden himself is deeply implicated. And of course, for Biden, the explosive event is that meeting in the Oval Office with Obama when they floated the idea just before the FBI interviewed Flynn. The idea was floated of bringing up the Logan Act. And there's good evidence, it's not conclusive, that the person who came up with that idea was either Biden himself or at least Obama, but anyway, Biden was involved in that discussion.
Yeah, and both investigations do center around Ukraine, Russia and Ukraine. But, you know, there's no doubt that China, in the laptop, China plays a prominent role, and the dealings with China and the China energy firm and all of these shady dealings. But right now, the United States people, they're being asked to support a war, a possible hot war with Russia, NATO against Russia. They are being asked to support this war. How are they going to possibly support a war like that if they come to the understanding that both in the case of Duran, but specifically in the case of this laptop, Hunter Biden and Joe Biden had all kinds of dealings. Definitely Hunter Biden, and you said tangentially, Joe Biden had all kinds of dealings going on in Ukraine from since 2014. I mean, how are the people in the United States going to square that circle? How are they going to say, wait a minute,
I mean,
you want us to get involved in this country where our president's son was doing all kinds of shady business dealings, and now we have it on record. I mean, we can see it in front of us now, and he's being investigated and possibly indicted for.
Well, I said tangentially because I don't want to go beyond the existing evidence. But can I just say there is some evidence, especially from Tony Babinski, who is being proved increasingly right, that he is directly implicated. I had that evidence hasn't been fully tested yet. But, you know, bear in mind that is a possibility too. So, and some of these things, if these things have a history going back to the time when he was vice president, I suspect that will be impeachable in itself, quite apart from, you know, the fact that he wasn't honest with the American people in the run-up to the election. So, you know, I want to make that clear. But if you're asking about how the American people can continue to support a president who's leading them into a crisis and a war, when the president himself is tarnished and implicated to the extent that it looks as if President Biden will be, well, the short answer is they won't. And they aren't already. I mean, I saw some opinion polling, and I mean, Biden's ratings are tanking. I think he's down to 40% approval. I think one poll put it even lower than that, in the mid-30s, which is catastrophically bad levels. And 70+% of Americans saying that the country's going in the wrong direction. The American people, very interestingly, have been far less worked up, far less swept along by the Ukraine hysteria than people in Europe have been. They've shown far greater skepticism about this whole affair, right from the first moment, which is, by the way, an important lesson for people. You always hear people say that, Americans don't have the nous that Europeans do. Well, these events, if anything, show the opposite. And that's, by the way, confirmed my long-standing view about Americans. But anyway, that's by the way. But the American people are already increasingly disillusioned and disenchanted with this president, with his White House, with his policy, this foreign policy over Ukraine. They're very uneasy about it. They're extremely angry about the state of the economy. And of course, if they sense that they were lied to before the election, which I'm sure they are, and if they discover that all these terrible things are going on, then you're going to see the president's popularity, such as it is, his remaining support simply collapse. And this could come, as I said, sometime in the summer.
Do you honestly believe that Hunter Biden can actually go to prison, can actually be indicted and face consequences for this? I mean, realistically, or do you think this will just be used to take down Biden and it'll be forgotten afterwards?
I think so. I mean, you always remember, if Biden resigns, his successor, who would, for the moment, still be Kamala Harris, but who would be a Democrat, can always exercise the pardon power. And I have a feeling they would, actually, because I don't think they would want a whole criminal investigation, a whole trial in which all these ghastly details came out, for the reason that Robert Barnes said in our live stream last week, that if that happened, it wouldn't just be the Bidens who would be implicated, it'd be all sorts of other people too.
Do you believe that Obama's pulling strings somewhere, anywhere in all of this? Because he's been awfully quiet.
Right. Well, that is exactly why I think he is pulling strings. That's the way he works. If Obama isn't saying anything, you can be absolutely sure that he is working overtime behind the scenes. And of course, he's pulling the strings.
He's had enough of Joe.
He's had enough of Joe. He's the true leader of the Democratic Party. He must be increasingly worried about what's going to happen in November. He must be increasingly concerned that Joe's gone off the deep end on Putin. I mean, more and more people are saying that Biden has a Putin obsession. I don't know whether that's true, by the way. It may just be whoever wrote his speeches has the obsession with Putin. But anyway, whatever. I think Obama has decided that the time has come to write Biden off.
I actually believe that Biden is obsessed with Putin. Obviously, we have people like Sullivan and Newland and Hillary Clinton who are obsessed with Putin as well. And you've had a lot of White House officials who have come out with statements saying that Biden takes Ukraine very personally. It's very personal for him in Ukraine. And I believe that. And the proof of that is that laptop. Because, Ukraine was personal to them. I mean, finances and doing businesses in the country and traveling to a country so often, that country becomes personal to you. And
absolutely,
it helps your life get better because of what you're doing there. So absolutely. Yeah, I think it is very personal for Biden and a lot of people who are pushing the war in Ukraine. Absolutely. And I don't think Ukraine was that personal for Obama, but he did appoint Biden to be his Ukraine czar. And there you might have the disconnect.
Well, Obama, it was not personal for Obama at all. I mean, that interview that he gave to The Atlantic made it absolutely clear that it wasn't, and he clearly wasn't he didn't want a military confrontation in Ukraine, when one which might drag in the United States and which might expose all sorts of dark things, including some of the dark things that he's been involved in. So bear that in mind. So there is that difference. As for Biden and his feelings about Ukraine, well, it's not just a question of it being personal for him. What you described to me sounded very much like a conflict of interest about somebody who cares so much about Ukraine and is so personally invested in Ukraine that he is not making decisions, objective decisions, that are in the interests of the United States, which is the actual country of which he is in fact the president.
Yeah,
So that's
finally,
that's a reason to remove him. That's a reason to remove him if it is true. And I think basically you're right. I mean, I think the Newlands and the Sullivans and all those write the speeches, but I've never got any sense that Biden himself is particularly resistant to this. I'm sure that he basically agrees with it all.
Exactly. And one final question. I was listening to the interview of Gonzalo with Scott Ritter, and Scott brought up an interesting point where he said that speech that Biden gave in Poland, where he called for regime change with regards to Russia, that might have been the straw that broke the camel's back for Biden and his tenure as president, because Scott said, and I'm kind of paraphrasing what Scott said. He said that it spooked a lot of people. Once again, this is too personal for Joe. He's too invested in this.
Excellent. Exactly. I mean, it horrified Europe. Even the Conservative, even the Johnson government was shocked. Everybody across Europe was horrified. But I think lots of people in the US were as well. And that's exactly right. It's too personal for Joe. And so personal for Joe that, as I said, he's leading the United States and the Western world off a cliff for what is increasingly looking like a personal fixation. And I agree, basically, with your point. I mean, he is personally invested in this, which, of course, it is incredibly dangerous to be. I mean, if you are so personally invested in another country, you cannot objectively lead your own. Once upon a time, this is going back a long way. It's about British history when Queen Mary Tudor was married to King Philip of Spain. The courtiers in London said, "Our Queen loves another realm more than this." Seems like the same is true of this administration, or at least its president. Yeah. It loves another country, Ukraine, more even than the United States.
And that laptop kind of is the glue that puts it all together, doesn't it?
Absolutely. So, I mean, if people across the political system start to sense that this is becoming dangerous and fixated, there was even a statement from various Democratic Party affiliated organisations, which actually, as I understand it, came together and wrote a public letter to Biden saying, you've got to stop personalising it around Putin. You've got to get off this escalation ladder. You've got to start doing diplomacy. And that, apparently came from the grassroots. Except, of course, I suspect, like everything that happens within the Democratic Party, it was orchestrated. So I suspect that more and more people in the Democratic Party are saying he's going to lose this Congress in November. He's going to open himself up to impeachment. He's got this terrible laptop floating around. He's tanking the economy. He's creating massive problems in Europe, and he's not going to change course, because he's not able to. He's psychologically obsessed with this thing. So this is the time to tell Joe to go.
Yeah. Very embarrassing for those 50 intelligence professionals who called it Russian disinformation as well and signed their name to the document. Very embarrassing.
I'm waiting for them all to come forward. I'm waiting for them all to come forward and apologise and provide some explanation for what they said, because there was not a scintilla of evidence when that laptop appeared in the New York Post, which is America's oldest newspaper, created by Alexander Hamilton. There wasn't a scintilla of evidence that it was true.
Yeah. And what big tech did to the New York Post as well. Will Big Tech apologize?
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, not just to the New York Post, but to all sorts of people. Are all those people who were thrown off platforms? Are they going to be given their places back?
They should take legal action if it's possible.
Well, of course they should. Yeah, well, if it's possible.
All right. Well, maybe because it's public record now, maybe they can.
Yeah, maybe they can. We'll see.
All right. We'll leave it there. The Duran.locals.com, everybody. And if you are watching this video on Rumble, you will see a red maroon button up top. Click that button. It takes you to our locals community. With one click, you'll get taken to our locals community. If you are watching from Rumble and the Duran.locals.com, that is where you will get all kinds of great content. And of course, the Duran shop, 10% off when you use the code Good Day. There's the mug.